All right, let's talk about a name that gets some strong reactions. Robert Greene. Is this guy a genius strategist who's just giving us the unvarnished truth about how the world works? Or is he peddling a pretty nasty, manipulative user's manual for life? That's what we're going to dig into today. His books sell millions, but boy, do they stir up controversy. So, let's get into it.
And this quote right here, it perfectly sums up the whole debate. It really forces you to ask yourself a big question. Is power just a neutral tool? You know, like a hammer. You can build a house with it, or you can smash a window. Or is the very pursuit of power, the way Greene lays it out, something that just chips away at who we are, at our better nature? Okay, so before we can even get into the controversy, we've got to understand Greene's world on his own terms. See, he never says his books are about morality. Not at all. He presents them as a practical guide. He's basically saying, hey, power has its own mechanics, its own physics, and if you want to get by in what he calls the subtle social game of everyday life, well, you better learn the rules. And the core idea, the absolute center of it all, is this concept of power dynamics. For Greene, power isn't good or evil. It's amoral. It's like a force of nature, almost like gravity. It's just there. It's all about spotting these hidden patterns of influence and strategy that he says are woven into every single human interaction. I mean, everything from a high-stakes business meeting to, passing the potatoes at the dinner table.
You know, the way he lays out his arguments is super methodical. It's the same formula every single chapter, like clockwork. First, you get this short, punchy, memorable law. Then, he pulls out a fascinating story from history to show you how it works in the real world. After that, he breaks down the psychology of why it works. And then, get this, he even gives you a reversal, a way the whole thing could blow up in your face. It feels less like a philosophy book and more like a lab manual. So let's take one of his most famous laws just to see how this all plays out. Law number 1, never outshine the master. The idea is actually pretty simple. You need to make sure the people above you, your bosses, your mentors, whoever, always feel secure and superior. Because if you make them feel insecure, even by accident, well, that's a very, very dangerous game to play. And his case study for this is just perfect. It's about this guy, Nicolas Fouquet. He was the finance minister for King Louis XIV of France. So Fouquet throws this massive, lavish party to honor the king. The problem, it was too good. So spectacular, so over the top, that it just made the king feel small and threatened. And the result? Louis had him thrown in prison for life. A classic case of outshining the master, and he paid for it big time. Right, so on the one hand, you can read a story like that and think, okay, good lesson learned. But a lot of people don't see it that way. For Greene's critics, this isn't just a cautionary tale. They see it as promoting a worldview that is just deeply cynical and frankly destructive. And this is where we get to the other side of the coin, the big critique. This review here really nails the main criticism. The argument is that Robert Greene isn't just some neutral observer writing down what he sees in human nature. No, the accusation is that he's actively cheering on our worst impulses, that he's painting this picture of humanity that is just relentlessly pessimistic, paranoid, and immoral. So you can really see the two camps forming here, can't you? It's this huge contrast. On one side, you've got people who defend Greene, saying, look, he's just being real. He's just describing the subtle social game we all play. But on the other side, the critics are saying, no way. This is a straight-up manual for manipulation. It turns every single human interaction into a battlefield. And that's the real fear, isn't it? That people will read these epic strategies from like emperors and legendary generals and then use them in their everyday lives. You know, to backstab a coworker for a promotion or to scheme their way into a better parking spot. It basically encourages you to see everyone around you as either a pawn to be used or an obstacle to be crushed. Okay, so how in the world do we square these two totally opposite views? Well, this gets us to the absolute core of the whole debate, and it really all boils down to one massive question. Is Robert Greene describing reality, or is he prescribing a way to act? I mean, this really is the central question, isn't it? Is he like a doctor who's just giving a diagnosis, maybe an uncomfortable one, about the pathology of how humans act, or is he more like an arms dealer, just passing out weapons so people can get better at hurting each other? Well, there's an academic take on this that comes down pretty firmly on the description side. It suggests that we should look at his work as an anatomical study. The argument is that Greene isn't telling you how to be. He's just pulling back the curtain on the hidden machinery of social life, machinery that people are using all the time, often without even knowing it.
And that whole idea that maybe these behaviors are totally unconscious, that leads us to an even deeper rabbit hole. Are the power plays Greene talks about the result of some cold, calculated intellectual strategy? Or are they something more primal, more instinctual?
Just think about it for a second. All those ruthless figures throughout history, do you think they were sitting there with a checklist, consciously following a bunch of laws of power? Or were they just running on pure, deep-seated instinct? You know, those primal drives for survival, dominance, and control? And this ties right into that old saying, power corrupts, but does it? Is power some external thing that takes good people and turns them bad? Or is it more that people who are already kind of wired a certain way just use power as a megaphone for who they already are? Greene's work definitely seems to lean toward that second idea.
So the argument here really is that a book like The 48 Laws of Power doesn't create manipulators out of thin air. It just gives a name and a framework to all these behaviors that people are already doing instinctively. It's like it's not teaching you a brand new language, it's just handing you a dictionary for a language you didn't even realize you were speaking.
There's this one academic source that uses this really cool, kind of nerdy term for this whole idea, hybrid epistemology. It sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It's that Greene's way of understanding power isn't just one thing. It's this incredible mashup of evolutionary psychology, our deep primal instincts, plus that classic cutthroat political realism you see in guys like Machiavelli, and the conscious way we all kind of perform for each other. So where does that leave us? We've looked at Greene's ideas, the big critiques against them, and this more nuanced synthesis. And I think what we're left with is that the meaning of these laws isn't really found in the pages of the book. It's found in us, in how we choose to read and interpret them. And that, maybe, says a lot more about us than it does about Robert Greene. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. What Greene's work does, for better or worse, is it rips the curtain away from all these unspoken, often uncomfortable power dynamics. The real question isn't whether he's right or wrong. The question is, when you look behind that curtain, what do you see? Do you see a bleak world of constant cynical warfare? Or do you see a set of tools, a new lens, to help you understand reality a little bit better? Your answer to that is probably the biggest takeaway you can get.